Hey there everybody, thanks for tuning in once again. We're going to get started just like we always do here. I'm going to start out by putting a decimal down here and some place values here so we can tell whole numbers and parts of whole numbers, or decimals or fractions or percentages, whatever you'd like to call them. They all have different names, but they all mean the same thing. That way we can tell the whole numbers from those pieces and parts of wholes. Okay? And as we talked about before, we've got two different sides after we establish where the decimal point is. Okay? That means that we have some place values over here that are parts and pieces of wholes, and then we've got whole numbers that start over here on the left side. So, I'm going to go ahead and identify the left and the right side of the decimal, as we like to call them ANDI. So whenever we're reading those numbers, we always say AND when we get to the decimal points. So we've got the right side as well. And the pattern for place value starts right here in the ones place. It's to the left of ANDI. So I'm going to go ahead and write down ones. And it goes on and on and on forever to the left, as we already know, and it starts there and it goes all the way on and on and on forever to the right. So the pattern for place value, as we've learned previously, is ones, tens, hundreds, ones, tens, hundreds. So you can get to the right side here, and we've got tenths with a THS. Remember here, a little reminder, we use that T and the H up there to help us remember the THS ending. So we've got ones, tenths, hundredths. Make my H look like an H there. And then this is actually, these are actually the 1,000ths. THS. And these will be the 10,000ths. Alright, one of the big things that we need to think about is that whenever we have numbers to the right of the decimal point, that all of these are parts and pieces of one whole. Okay? This is where all fractions live, even though they look a little bit different than decimal points, decimal place values rather. This is where all the fractions live. All of the decimal place values live here. In fact, these are the decimal places. All percentages live to the right of the decimal point. And most importantly, the way that we always need to remember this, and this is critical, that these are all parts of wholes. Parts of one whole, to be precise. Over here on the left side, this is where all whole numbers live. Every single one of them. All whole numbers. All of them. Alright? Another thing that we need to take into consideration is when we're talking about fractions, decimal places, or decimal place values, percentages, they're all parts of wholes. If we think about a number line, if we consider a number line, we start with 0, and we get all the way to 1, every single fraction, every single percentage, except for percentages that are 100% and up, every single fraction, every decimal, all of those live right here between 0 and 1. So this is where we find all fractions, regular fractions, every single one of the decimal place values. Some people call them decimals. I like to call them decimal place values, or decimal places. All percentages live here. And most importantly, the concept that you need to understand is these are all between 0 and 1. All parts of wholes. Part of one whole to be exact. Okay? Another way to think about this would be pieces. Pieces of the whole. I'm going to get creative in the explanation here, coming right up here. Alright, let's consider we have one whole graham cracker. So that's going to go to the left of Andy. It's going to go in the ones place, up until the point where it gets smashed. Then it's no longer one whole. So therefore it has to be on the right side of the decimal point. So it's part of a whole. It's in pieces, obviously. So it's going to be a fractional part of the whole thing. It's going to be a decimal. It's going to be a percentage of the whole. It's parts and pieces. Here's a whole apple. Same thing. All you need to do, take a bite of the apple, and then next thing you know, it's no longer to the left of the decimal point. It's now to the right because it's no longer one whole. Here's another example of a part of a whole. This is going to be to the right of the decimal, so it's in the decimal place values, as opposed to the whole thing, which is always to the left. Here's our last example before we have a student help out. So here is one whole table. All whole numbers can be found to the left of the decimal point, and all fractions, all decimal place values, all parts and pieces of wholes, all percentages can be found to the right, such as right here. Alright, got a student here that's going to help us out. He's going to show off what he knows. First thing I'm going to do is put down our decimal, which we affectionately call Andy. So whenever we read a number and we get to that decimal, we say
and.
Right, exactly. So since we've got our decimal, we've got our Andy down, I'm going to draw a line here, and that's going to separate things on the left side and the right side. Okay, so here we go. The pattern for place value starts to the left of Andy, right? And it is the ones place, which makes this place value to the right what?
10.
Good, with a THS. TENTHS. Tenths place, which makes this the
hundredths.
Hundredths, good. Which makes this the
1,000ths.
Good, the 1,000ths. Try and do this neater here. 1,000ths. THS. Good. So, if we're talking about all this stuff, that means that every number that we have to the left of the decimal place are all what?
Whole numbers, or 1 or greater.
Good. So this is where every single one of the whole numbers live. They all live to the left of the decimal. All whole numbers. Every single one of them. All of them. All whole numbers. Excellent. Okay. And they all have to be 1. What did you tell me?
1s or greater.
Yeah, it's got to be 1 whole or greater. Good. Okay. That means that everything that's to the right are what?
All fractions.
They're fractions. Let me get that written down here. So every single one of these over here, they're the same thing as fractions. They just look different. So we've got their fractions. What else are they?
Decimal place values.
Yeah, they're decimal place values. Good. Decimal. We'll just say they're the decimal places. Okay. Those are the same thing as
percents.
Good. Catching on quick. And every single one of these numbers to the right of the decimal are what?
Are parts of one whole.
Yep, they have to be parts of wholes. They're all parts of one whole. Good. So, if I were to do this, if I drew a number line, and 0 started there, and 1 started here, what would I be able to find between 0 and 1?
All fractions?
Absolutely. Every single fraction can be found between 0 and 1. It's the same thing we just wrote down. All fractions live here. Good. What else lives there? from 0, between 0 and 1.
Decimal place
Yep.
values.
You bet. Decimal place values, good. What else? I'll say decimal places.
Percents.
Percents. Every single percent, as long as it's less than 100%. Percents, I'm going to go ahead and say less than 100, because 100 is the whole thing. But every single one of these things are all what?
Parts of one whole.
Good. I'm going to drive that point home here. These are all parts of one whole. Okay, I'm going to give you a quiz now. Alright, so where does this paper go? It's not a whole paper, it's a piece of paper. Does it go to the left or to the right of the decimal?
It would go to the right because it's part of one whole.
Good, it's part of one whole paper. Okay? Definitely part of a whole. Gonna move on to another one here and see what you're made of. Alright, where should this go? Should it go to the left or to the right?
It should go to the left because it is a whole number and it is 1 and greater.
Yeah, it's 1 or greater than a whole paper. Good deal. So, kind of review here, if it lets us do it here. All of our fractions live to the right of the decimal place value, or the decimal place to Andy. Every single one of those are decimal places. All percents live there because they're all parts of one whole. Okay? All whole numbers 1 and greater, they all live over here on the left side. On and on and on and on forever. These go on and on and on forever. Get it out of there. All of these go on and on and on forever, and these are the smallest pieces and parts of wholes that you can imagine. And every single one of those, we can get back to it here, every single one of those, they live between 0 and 1. That's less than a whole. This is less than a whole. And everyone's favorite fraction seems to be, at least kids I teach, they love this fraction. It's 1/2. That's part of a whole. It's the same thing as 0.5, which is the same thing as 5/10. Okay? It's the same thing as 50%. Okay? And that's certainly going to be another lesson down the road, but I thank you for your time. You did a great job, and now you know a little bit more than you knew a couple minutes ago. Good job.
Thank you.